The courtroom reeked of alien sweat and fear. Marcus Chun stood in the defendant's cage, his hands bound with energy shackles that hummed with each heartbeat. Around him, the Galactic Tribunal's chambers stretched impossibly high, filled with representatives from dozens of species. The Vorthak judge, a massive crab-like creature with 6 eyes that glowed like molten copper, clicked its mandibles in what Marcus had learned was their version of gavel-banging. Human Marcus Chun. The judge's voice boomed through the universal translator, making the words sound hollow and mechanical. You stand accused of the murder of Ambassador Zilktar of the Hegemony, theft of classified military codes, and conspiracy against the Galactic Union. How do you plead? Marcus lifted his chin, meeting those burning orange eyes with his own steel-gray gaze. Not guilty on all charges. A ripple of sound moved through the assembled crowd. Clicks, hisses, warbles that the translator couldn't quite capture. The hegemony section erupted in angry chittering. The Zilani ambassador, a tall, pale creature with too many joints in its arms, rose from its seat. "This human lies," it declared, its voice like broken glass. "We have video evidence of the murder. We demand traditional justice." Traditional justice. Marcus's stomach clenched. He'd heard the stories, whispered in the dark corners of human settlements across the galaxy. When the Galactic Union couldn't decide on punishment, when the crime was too heinous or the politics too complex, they turned to the old ways. They fed criminals to the ancient Kraken. The creature had been sleeping in the depths of Abyssos Prime for millions of years before any of the current civilizations had even discovered fire. It was older than memory, older than recorded history, a thing of tentacles and teeth and bottomless hunger that the ancient races had worshipped as a god of judgment. When they fed it criminals, it was said to taste their guilt and consume them accordingly. The innocent, it was said, it would reject. But nobody innocent had been fed to it in over 3,000 years. The evidence is circumstantial. Marcus's court-appointed defender squeaked. Keth was a Mombari, a small, furry creature that looked like a cross between a raccoon and an accountant. His species was known for their legal expertise, but Marcus could see the fear in his large black eyes. My client was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Wrong place. The prosecutor, a towering hegemony warrior with scales that shifted color with its mood, stepped forward. Currently, those scales were deep purple, the color of rage. He was found standing over Ambassador Zilktar's corpse, covered in the ambassador's blood, with the stolen codes in his possession. Marcus wanted to explain, wanted to scream the truth, but he'd already tried. The Real killers had framed him perfectly. He'd been investigating corruption in the human colonial administration when he'd stumbled onto something bigger, a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the Galactic Union itself. Ambassador Zilktar had been about to help him expose it when they'd both been betrayed. But Marcus had no proof. His evidence had been destroyed, his contacts were dead or missing, and the conspirators had made sure that all the evidence pointed directly at him. The defendant's previous military record shows a pattern of violence. The prosecutor continued, projecting holographic images above the courtroom. 17 confirmed kills during the border wars. Decorated for exceptional aggression in combat. This human is a natural-born killer. Those were enemy combatants in a declared war. Keth protested, but his voice was barely audible over the crowd's murmurs. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, remembering those battles. He'd been young then, barely 20, full of righteous anger about humanity's place in the galaxy. The border wars had been humanity's introduction to galactic politics, a brutal lesson that their new alien neighbors didn't see them as equals. 3 human colonies had been destroyed before the Union had finally stepped in to mediate. The evidence is clear, the Vorthak judge announced. However, given the gravity of the charges and the political implications, this tribunal cannot reach a unanimous decision. Therefore, we invoke the ancient right of divine judgment. The courtroom fell silent except for the hum of the environmental systems. Even the translator seemed to pause, as if reluctant to speak the next words. The defendant will be presented to the ancient kraken of Abyssos Prime. Let the deep judge decide his fate. Marcus felt his legs go weak. Around him, the assembled aliens burst into excited chatter. Some seemed pleased, others disturbed. The human diplomatic section, all three of them, looked horrified. Earth had only been part of the Galactic Union for 50 years, and they still didn't have the political weight to protect their own citizens in cases like this. "Your Honor," Keth squeaked, "I must protest. The ancient rites are barbaric. Surely, in this modern age, the ancient rites are the foundation of galactic law." The judge cut him off. "They predate every current civilization. To reject them would be to reject the very basis of our union. The human will be transported to Abyssos Prime within a cycle." As the guards moved to escort him away, Marcus caught sight of someone in the crowd that made his blood freeze. Admiral Cross, the human who'd first recruited him into intelligence work, was sitting in the observer's section. The older man's face was carefully neutral, but when their eyes met, Cross gave the slightest shake of his head. The message was clear: you're on your own. The holding cells beneath the tribunal were carved from the living rock of the asteroid where the court convened. Marcus sat on the hard bench, staring at the energy barrier that served as his door. In 6 hours, they would load him onto a transport ship and take him to Abyssos Prime. In 12 hours, he would be fed to a creature that had been judging criminals since before humans had discovered agriculture. "Hey," the voice came from a cell across from his. Marcus looked up to see another human, a woman about his age with short-cropped black hair and intelligent brown eyes. "You're the one going to the Kraken, right? News travels fast." "I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell," she said, settling cross-legged on her own bench. "Xenobiology. I was studying deep-sea life forms on Kepler 442b when I allegedly stole some research samples." "Did you?" She grinned. "Absolutely. But they belonged to my research team anyway. My corporate sponsors just didn't like the conclusions we were reaching." Her expression grew serious. "You really didn't kill that ambassador, did you?" "No, but that doesn't seem to matter much now. Actually, it might matter more than you think." Sarah glanced around, then lowered her voice. "I've been studying the ancient Kraken for years. Not officially, of course. The Union keeps most information about it classified. But I've managed to piece together some interesting facts." Marcus moved closer to the barrier. Such as the fact that it really does reject the innocent. Not because it's some mystical judge of souls, but because it's incredibly intelligent. More intelligent than any of the Union races want to admit. It doesn't just taste guilt. It tastes fear, desperation, truth. It can read the chemical composition of your blood, your sweat, your tears. It knows things about you that you don't even know about yourself. So what? I'm still going to die. Maybe. Or maybe you'll be the first person in 3 millennia to walk away from the deep judge. Sarah's eyes gleamed with scientific curiosity. Think about it. Every criminal they've fed to it has been guilty. Of course it ate them. But what happens when they feed it someone truly innocent? Someone who's not afraid to die because they know they're in the right. Marcus laughed bitterly. "You think I'm not afraid? I think you're terrified. But not of dying, you're afraid of failing. Afraid that whoever framed you'll get away with it. Afraid that the real conspiracy will never be exposed." She paused. "The Kraken will taste that too." Before Marcus could respond, the guard arrived. 4 of them, 2 hegemony warriors and 2 Vorthack soldiers. They were taking no chances. "Time to go, human," one of the Vorthack growled, deactivating the cell barrier. As they shackled him again, Sarah called out, "Marcus, remember, the Kraken isn't your enemy. It's just as much a prisoner as you are. It's been trapped on that world for millions of years, forced to play judge for creatures it probably considers inferior. Think about that when you meet it. The transport ship was a hegemony vessel, sleek and predatory like everything their species built. Marcus was locked in a small chamber near the cargo hold, with barely enough room to lie down. Through the single porthole, he watched the stars whirl past as they jumped through hyperspace. He'd never seen Abyssos Prime, but he'd heard the stories. It was a water world, completely covered by oceans that reached depths of over 30 kilometers in some places. The ancient kraken lived in the deepest trenches, in water so cold and dark that most species couldn't survive there even with environmental suits. The feeding ritual was always the same. They would lower the criminal in a special chamber that would take them down to the kraken's level. The chamber was equipped with cameras and sensors to record what happened, though the recordings were classified at the highest levels. Sometimes the chamber came back empty. Sometimes it came back with pieces. Preparing for orbital insertion, the pilot announced over the comm system. Arrival at Abyssos Prime in 1 hour. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to meditate, a technique he'd learned during his military training. He thought about his childhood on New Geneva, about his parents who'd worked themselves to death trying to build a life on a frontier world. He thought about the colonies that had been destroyed in the border wars, about the friends he'd lost, about the corruption he'd discovered that reached to the very heart of the Union. Most of all, he thought about Ambassador Zilktar, lying in his own blood, reaching out with one trembling hand to pass Marcus a data chip that had been destroyed before Marcus could analyze it. "You must stop them," the ambassador had wheezed with his dying breath. "They will destroy everything we've built." Who were they? What were they planning? Marcus still didn't know, and now he might never find out. The ship shuddered as they entered Abyssos Prime's atmosphere. Through the porthole, Marcus could see the endless blue-green ocean stretching to the horizon. There was no land visible anywhere, just water and the massive orbital platforms that served the Kraken's feeding ritual. "Welcome to Abyssos Prime," came the pilot's voice, tinged with dark humor. "Please keep your limbs inside the vessel at all times." The docking was smooth and professional. Marcus could feel the ship settling onto one of the platforms, could hear the mechanical sounds of the docking clamps engaging. In a few minutes, they would come for him. He thought about Sarah's words. The Kraken wasn't his enemy. It was a prisoner just like him, a creature that had been forced to serve as an executioner for millions of years, judging the sins of species that were children compared to its ancient wisdom. What would such a creature think of humanity? They were the newest members of the Union, barely 50 years since first contact. Compared to the other races, humans were young, aggressive, unpredictable. Some species saw them as promising. Others saw them as dangerous. But what would the ancient Kraken see? The chamber door hissed open, and the guards entered. "Time for judgment, human," the hegemony captain said. "Try to die with dignity." They marched him through the ship's corridors, past viewports that showed the vast ocean below. The feeding platform was a massive structure, all black metal and harsh lights, designed for function rather than comfort. At its center was the descent chamber, a spherical cage made of some transparent material that Marcus didn't recognize. A crowd had gathered to watch, not just the ship's crew, but representatives from several species who had come specifically to witness his judgment. Marcus spotted a few humans in the crowd, including a woman in Union Navy uniform who looked vaguely familiar. Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez. She introduced herself quietly as the guards prepared the descent chamber. "Naval Intelligence. I knew your father." Marcus stared at her. "My father died when I was 7. He died in service to the Union," she said carefully. "And you would be proud of what you've been trying to do. Exposing the corruption in the colonial administration, that took courage. Fat lot of good it did. Maybe more good than you know." She glanced around, then leaned closer. "The Kraken isn't just an executioner, Marcus. It's one of the oldest living creatures in the galaxy. It remembers things that the Union wants forgotten. If anyone can help you find the truth, it's the Deep Judge." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the guards were pushing him toward the chamber. The technician, a nervous-looking Mombari, ran through the standard safety briefing in a voice that suggested he didn't believe any of it. "The chamber is equipped with life support for up to 6 hours, he squeaked. "Environmental controls will maintain pressure and atmosphere during descent. Recording equipment will document the encounter for official records. Do you have any final words for the record?" Marcus looked up at the crowd of aliens watching him. their faces showing everything from curiosity to bloodthirsty anticipation. In a few minutes, he would descend into the deepest parts of an alien ocean to meet a creature older than civilization itself. "Yeah," he said, stepping into the chamber. "I'm innocent, and I'm going to prove it." The technician sealed the chamber, and with a grinding mechanical sound, the platform began to lower. Marcus watched the light fade above him as he descended into the dark waters of Abyssos Prime, carrying with him the hopes of a species that still had so much to learn about the galaxy they joined. The water outside the chamber was crystal clear at first, teeming with bioluminescent creatures that pulsed and swirled in patterns too complex to follow. Fish that looked like living jewels darted past, and jellyfish the size of buildings drifted by like underwater clouds. But as he descended deeper, the water grew darker and colder. The pressure readings on the chamber's display climbed steadily higher. 500 meters, 1,000, 2,000. The last traces of sunlight faded away, leaving only the chamber's internal lights to illuminate the alien waters around him. At 3,000 meters, he saw his first sign of the Kraken's presence. Bones, massive ones, scattered across the ocean floor like the remains of some titanic battle. Not just the bones of criminals. These were far older, the skeletons of creatures that had lived and died long before any current galactic civilization had evolved. At 5,000 meters, the tentacles appeared. They emerged from the darkness slowly, almost gently, each one thicker than the chamber itself. The skin was mottled with patterns that shifted and changed as Marcus watched, and along their length were markings that might have been scars or might have been some form of ancient writing. The chamber came to rest on the ocean floor with a soft thud, and Marcus found himself face to face with something that defied description. The ancient Kraken was vast beyond comprehension, its body lost in the darkness beyond the chamber's lights. What he could see was a collection of eyes, dozens of them, each one larger than his head, watching him with an intelligence that made his skin crawl. But it was the voice that truly shocked him, not spoken aloud, but somehow transmitted directly into his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "So, the ancient Kraken said in a voice like the grinding of tectonic plates, 'They send me another human.' How interesting." Marcus pressed himself against the far wall of the chamber, his heart hammering against his ribs. The ancient Kraken's massive eyes studied him with the patience of geological time, unblinking orbs that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "You can hear me," the creature observed, its mental voice carrying undertones of amusement. "That is unexpected. Most of your species possess such limited telepathic sensitivity." "You've met humans before?" Marcus managed to ask, though speaking felt strange when the creature was communicating directly with his mind. "Met." An interesting choice of words. One of the massive tentacles shifted, sending a current of water that rocked the chamber gently. "3 of your kind have been brought before me in the past cycles, each one guilty of the crimes for which they were accused. Each one consumed." The casual way it said "consumed" made Marcus's stomach clench. "And you're going to do the same to me?" "That remains to be determined." The Kraken's eyes seemed to focus on him with greater intensity. "Tell me, little human, what do you believe justice to be?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He'd expected threats, demands, maybe some cosmic pronouncement of guilt or innocence. He hadn't expected philosophy. What do you mean?" "Your species is young," the Kraken continued, apparently in no hurry. "Barely a breath in the timeline of galactic civilization. Yet you have strong opinions about right and wrong, justice and injustice. I am curious about your perspective." Marcus found himself thinking about his military training, about the ethics classes they'd made all officers attend. Justice is about truth, about making sure the guilty are punished and the innocent are protected. A simple answer. Naive, perhaps, but sincere. The creature's mental voice carried what might have been approval. And what if the system designed to provide this justice is itself corrupt? What if those in power use the mechanisms of law to protect themselves and destroy their enemies? Then, someone has to stand up to them, Marcus said without thinking. Even if it costs everything. Even if it costs your life? Yes. The Kraken was silent for a long moment, its massive form shifting slightly in the darkness. When it spoke again, its voice carried a weight of centuries. I've been the judge of this tribunal for longer than your species has existed, it said. I have tasted the guilt of countless beings, felt their fear and desperation as they face their final moments. Do you know what I taste when I examine you? Marcus shook his head, not trusting his voice. Anger, frustration, a burning desire for truth that outweighs even your fear of death. The Kraken's tentacles moved closer to the chamber, close enough that Marcus could see the intricate patterns on its skin. But no guilt, no shame, no sense of wrongdoing in your actions. Because I didn't do what they accused me of. Perhaps. Or perhaps you were simply an excellent liar, even to yourself. The creature's eyes seemed to twinkle with dark humor. Shall we find out? Before Marcus could ask what it meant, one of the tentacles extended toward the chamber. Marcus tensed, expecting the transparent walls to shatter under the creature's immense strength. But instead, the tentacle simply touched the surface. Where it made contact, the material became permeable, allowing the tentacle to pass through without breaking the chamber seal. Do not be afraid, the Kraken said, though its voice carried an undertone that suggested fear was exactly the appropriate response. This will not harm you. Much. The tentacle touched Marcus's forehead, and suddenly, the world exploded into sensation. It wasn't just telepathy. It was as if every memory, every thought, every emotion he'd ever experienced was being examined by an intelligence vast beyond human comprehension. Marcus felt the Kraken moving through his mind like a librarian browsing through files. His childhood on New Geneva, working in his parents' shop while dreaming of the stars. His military training, the pride he'd felt when he'd earned his commission. The border wars, the friends he'd lost, the enemy soldiers he'd killed in combat. He felt the creature pause when it reached his memories of joining Union intelligence, of the idealistic young officer who'd believed he could make a difference in the galaxy. It lingered over his investigation into the colonial corruption, the late nights spent poring over financial records and shipping manifests, the growing realization that the problem was bigger than he'd imagined. Interesting, the Kraken murmured, its voice now coming from inside Marcus's own mind. Show me the night of the murder. The memory unfolded like a holographic projection. Marcus was back in Ambassador Zilktar's private office on Kepler Station, surrounded by the aliens' collection of crystalline art from a dozen worlds. The ambassador, a tall, graceful being with silver skin and large black eyes, was reviewing the documents Marcus had brought. This is worse than we suspected, Zilktar said, his translator giving his words a musical quality. The shipping records you've uncovered show massive diversions of resources. Medical supplies meant for the frontier colonies, construction materials for defensive installations, all of it being redirected to private accounts. That's just the beginning, Marcus replied, pulling up another data file on his portable display. Look at this. Requisitions for military hardware that was supposedly destroyed in training accidents. Except the hardware was never delivered to the training facilities in the first place. Zilktar's large eyes widened. Someone is building a private army, or selling the equipment to the highest bidder. Maybe both. Marcus highlighted several entries on the display. The financial trail leads to a consortium of corporations with ties to the hegemony military-industrial complex. But there are human names on the board of directors. Which humans? Marcus pulled up another file, but before he could answer, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing the room in a red glow that made everything look like a scene from hell. Security breach, an automated voice announced. Intruders detected. All personnel report to emergency stations. That's impossible, Zilktar said, moving toward his communications console. This station has Union-grade security. The office door exploded inward. 3 figures in black combat armor burst through the smoke, weapons raised. Marcus recognized the design, human military grade, but modified with alien technology. Ambassador Zilktar, the lead figure said, its voice distorted by the armor's vocalizer. You've been asking too many questions. I'm under diplomatic protection, Zilktar replied, drawing himself up to his full height. If you harm me, it will mean war between our species. No, the figure replied, raising its weapon. It will mean war between the Union and the Resistance. The shots came fast and precise. Zilktar crumpled, silver blood pooling beneath his body. Marcus dove for cover behind the ambassador's desk, drawing his sidearm, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. The human's a problem, one of the attackers said. We can't let him report what he's seen. Actually, the leader replied, I think Lieutenant Chun is exactly what we need. They shot Marcus with a stunner, and the world went black. When he woke up, he was lying next to Zilktar's corpse, covered in the ambassador's blood, with a data chip containing the stolen military codes clutched in his hand. Security forces were pounding on the door, and Marcus knew with sick certainty that he'd been perfectly framed. Fascinating, the Kraken observed as the memory faded. And you never saw the faces of your attackers? They were wearing full combat armor. But I recognized the voice of the leader. Oh, Marcus hesitated. This was the part he'd never told anyone. Not his lawyer, not the tribunal, not even himself until this moment. It was Admiral Cross, my former commanding officer, the man who recruited me into intelligence work. The Kraken's tentacle pressed more firmly against Marcus's forehead, and suddenly he was experiencing the memory again, but with the creature's enhanced perception. Details he'd missed became crystal clear. The slight limp in the leader's gait, the distinctive way he held his weapon, the habit of tapping his fingers against his thigh when he was thinking. You have excellent observational skills, the Kraken noted. Yet you chose not to reveal this information during your trial. Why? Because I had no proof, Marcus said. And because I couldn't believe it. Cross was like a father to me. He saved my life during the border wars. I thought there had to be some other explanation. But there was not. No, there wasn't. The Kraken withdrew its tentacle, and Marcus gasped as his mind returned to his own control. The creature's massive eyes studied him with what might have been sympathy. Your Admiral Cross, the Kraken said slowly, is part of a conspiracy that reaches far beyond simple corruption. He and his allies seek to destabilize the Union itself, to create chaos that will allow them to seize power. How do you know that? Because he is not the first conspirator I have encountered. The creature's mental voice carried a weight of terrible knowledge. Over the past several cycles, I have judged 12 beings from 6 different species who were involved in various aspects of this plot. Each one believed they were working for a different cause, but the pattern has become clear. Marcus felt his heart racing. You're saying there's a galactic conspiracy? Indeed. And your investigation has brought you closer to exposing it than anyone before you. The Kraken shifted, its massive bulk creating currents that rocked the chamber. That is why you were framed so thoroughly. You had become too dangerous to ignore. But if you know all this, why haven't you told the Union authorities? The Kraken's laugh was like the sound of grinding tectonic plates. Tell them? Little human, I am a prisoner here, just as much as you are. I am brought criminals to judge, but I am not permitted to speak of what I learn. The ancient protocols that govern my existence forbid it. Then how the protocols, the Kraken interrupted, say nothing about what I may do with innocent beings who are falsely accused. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold water around him. What are you saying? I am saying, Marcus Chun, that you have a choice to make. The creature's eyes focused on him with laser intensity. I can fulfill my role as judge, declare you innocent, and send you back to the surface, where you will live but accomplish nothing. The conspiracy will continue, more innocents will die, and eventually your species will find itself destroyed by forces you never saw coming. Or you can choose to become something more than a victim of injustice. You can become an agent of truth. The chamber began to shake as the Kraken moved, massive tentacles stirring up the ocean floor. Ancient machinery hidden in the depths began to activate, sending vibrations through the water that Marcus could feel in his bones. Long ago, the Kraken continued. Before the current galactic civilizations existed, my people built this place. Not as a prison, but as a sanctuary. A place where knowledge could be preserved and truth could be protected. When the ancient races bound me here, they thought they were creating an executioner. Instead, they created a guardian. Images began to flash through Marcus's mind. Visions of the ocean depths that surrounded them. Hidden installations built into underwater mountains, vast libraries of crystallized data, weapons, and technologies that have been waiting for millions of years. The conspiracy you stumbled upon is only the latest threat to galactic stability, the Kraken explained. There have been others throughout history, species that sought to dominate, factions that would have destroyed the balance that allows civilization to exist. Each time, I've acted to preserve what must be preserved. You want me to help you? I want to offer you the tools to complete your mission. The Kraken's mental voice grew more intense. To expose the truth you sought, to bring justice to those who believe themselves above the law. But the choice must be yours. I will not compel you. Marcus thought about his parents, dead of overwork on a frontier world where medical supplies have been diverted by corruption. He thought about his friends who died in the border wars while politicians played games with their lives. He thought about Ambassador Zilktar, reaching out with his dying breath to pass on information that might save countless lives. What would I have to do? First, you must die. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. What? The surface observers must believe that justice has been served, the Kraken explained calmly. They must see evidence that you have been judged and found guilty. Only then will the conspirators believe themselves safe from exposure. You want to fake my death? Not fake it. Transform it. The creature's tentacles moved in complex patterns, and Marcus could see bioluminescent displays activating throughout its body. I will provide you with genetic modifications that will allow you to survive in environments that would kill an unmodified human. Enhanced strength, improved reaction time, the ability to process information at superhuman speeds. You will become something new, something capable of challenging those who believe themselves untouchable. And in return, you will serve as my agent in the galaxy above. You will investigate the conspiracy, gather evidence, and when the time is right, you will expose the truth in a way that cannot be denied or suppressed. Marcus closed his eyes, thinking about the choice before him. He could return to the surface, clear his name, and live a quiet life knowing that the real villains had escaped justice. Or he could take on a mission that might save countless lives, but would require him to give up everything he'd ever been. How many people have died because of this conspiracy? He asked. Million. And many more will die if it is not stopped. And you think I can stop it? I think you are the first person in position to try, the Kraken replied. Your investigation had already come closer to the truth than any before it. With my resources and your determination, we might actually succeed. Marcus thought about Elena Vasquez's words on the platform above, that his father would be proud of what he'd been trying to do. He thought about all the innocent people who would suffer if the conspiracy succeeded. He opened his eyes and looked directly into the ancient Kraken's massive gaze. What I need to do? The Kraken's mental voice carried what sounded like satisfaction. First, we fake your death convincingly. Then, we begin your real education. The creature's tentacles moved toward the chamber again, but this time Marcus didn't flinch. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. Above them, on the distant surface, cameras recorded what appeared to be the ancient Kraken consuming another guilty criminal. The observers would report that justice had been served, that the human Marcus Chun had been judged and found wanting. They had no idea. They had just witnessed the birth of something that would hunt them down with the patience of geological time and the determination of a species that refused to accept injustice. In the depths of Abyssos Prime, the real work was about to begin. 3 months after Marcus Chun officially died in the depths of Abyssos Prime, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in Admiral Cross's office, watching the man who had become the Union's greatest hero pour himself a drink from a bottle that cost more than most people made in a year. "The investigation is closed," Cross said, not looking at her as he spoke. Chun was guilty. The Kraken judged him. End of story. "The evidence was circumstantial at best," Elena replied carefully. She'd been walking a tightrope for months, trying to investigate the conspiracy without arousing suspicion. And there are still questions about how he got access to— "Drop it, Captain." Cross turned to face her, and Elena was struck by how much he'd changed in the past year. The man who'd once been her mentor looked older, harder, as if something inside him had crystallized into cold ambition. Chun was a traitor and a murderer. The galaxy is better off without him. Elena nodded and left the office, but her mind was racing. She'd known Marcus Chun, had served with him during the border wars. The idea that he would murder an ambassador and steal military secrets was absurd. But the evidence had been overwhelming, and now he was dead. Except Elena didn't think he was dead at all. She'd been there during the feeding ceremony, had watched the descent chamber disappear into the dark waters of Abyssos Prime. But something about the whole situation felt wrong. The ancient Kraken had taken an unusually long time to render judgment. Over 6 hours when most cases were decided in minutes. And when the chamber had finally been retrieved, the biological residue inside had been minimal. More importantly, Elena had been monitoring communications traffic ever since the trial, and she'd noticed something interesting. Several members of the conspiracy that Chun had been investigating had gone quiet immediately after his death. Not the behavior of people celebrating the elimination of a threat, but of people who were still worried about something. Her thoughts were interrupted by a priority message on her personal communicator, a device with encryption so advanced that only a handful of people in the galaxy had access to it. Pier 47, Sublevel 3. "Come alone." A friend of Marcus Chun, Elena stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Someone was playing a dangerous game, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to be involved. But curiosity won out over caution, and an hour later she found herself in the maintenance tunnels beneath New Geneva Station's docking bay. Pier 47 Sublevel 3 was a storage area that hadn't been used in years, filled with obsolete equipment and the detritus of a busy space station. Elena moved carefully through the maze of crates and machinery, her hand resting on her sidearm. "Captain Vasquez." She spun toward the voice, weapon drawn, and froze. Standing in the shadows was a figure that looked like Marcus Chun, but different. Taller, more muscular, with eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. The modifications were subtle, but unmistakable. This was what Marcus Chun had become. "Hello, Elena," he said, stepping into the light. "Thanks for coming." "You're supposed to be dead," she said, not lowering her weapon. "I am dead." Marcus Chun died in the depths of Abyssos Prime, judged by the ancient Kraken and found innocent. He moved closer, and Elena could see the inhuman grace in his movements. "What you're looking at is something new, something designed to finish the job Marcus started. The conspiracy goes deeper than we imagined. Admiral Cross is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Marcus, or whatever he'd become, activated a holographic display from a device on his wrist. The Kraken showed me the pattern. Over the past 50 years, key figures in Union government and military have been systematically replaced or corrupted. The goal isn't just to steal resources or build a private army. It's to collapse the Union entirely." Elena stared at the display, which showed a web of connections spanning dozens of worlds and multiple species. Why would anyone want to destroy the Union? Because some people believe that the only way to achieve true galactic dominance is to eliminate the current power structure entirely. They want to return to the old ways, when might made right, and the strong ruled over the weak. Marcus manipulated the display, highlighting specific nodes in the network. The human colonial administration was just their testing ground, a way to perfect their methods before applying them on a larger scale. The border wars, Elena breathed, suddenly understanding. They engineered them. 3 human colonies destroyed, thousands of casualties, all to test whether they could manipulate different species into conflict. Marcus's voice carried a cold fury that made Elena shiver. And when humanity proved more resilient than they expected, they began recruiting from within our own ranks. Cross and others. The conspiracy has tentacles in every major government and military organization in the Union. Marcus closed the display and looked directly at Elena. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated what they were creating when they tried to eliminate me. Elena finally lowered her weapon. What did the Kraken do to you? Enhance me. Physically, mentally, genetically. I'm still human, but I'm also something more. Marcus held up his hand, and Elena watched in fascination as his fingertips began to glow with bioluminescent patterns. The Kraken's people were master genetic engineers. They built safeguards into my modifications. I can't be corrupted, can't be turned, can't be stopped by conventional means. You're talking about starting a war. I'm talking about ending one that most people don't even know is being fought. Marcus reactivated the display, zooming in on a specific section that showed recent activities. In the past 3 months, the conspiracy has accelerated their timeline. They're planning something big, something that will destabilize the Union beyond repair. Elena studied the data, her military training helping her parse the complex information. These shipping routes, they're not random. They're surrounding the core worlds. Exactly. Whatever they're planning, it's going to happen soon. Marcus looked at her with those strangely luminous eyes. I need your help, Elena. I can't do this alone. What kind of help? The kind that involves betraying everything you've sworn to uphold in the service of a higher truth. Marcus's expression was deadly serious. The conspiracy has people in Union intelligence, in the fleet, in the government itself. I need someone I can trust, someone with access to classified information and the ability to move freely through military installations. Elena was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the implications. If Marcus was right, then the Union was already at war. They just didn't know it yet. And if the conspiracy succeeded in their plans, millions of innocent beings would die in the chaos that followed. What's the first target? She asked. Marcus smiled, and for a moment she could see the man she'd once known beneath the genetic modifications. Admiral Cross. But we're not going to kill him. We're going to make him talk. 2 weeks later, Admiral Cross was reviewing the latest intelligence reports in his private study when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, but the backup lighting was dim and cast strange shadows throughout the room. Security to Admiral Cross's quarters, he said into his communicator, but there was no response. The device was completely dead. Hello, Admiral. Cross spun toward the voice and felt his blood freeze. Standing in the doorway was Marcus Chun, or someone who looked exactly like him. But that was impossible. He'd watched Chun die, had seen the Kraken's judgment firsthand. You're dead, Cross said, reaching for his sidearm. Yes, I am. Marcus stepped into the room, moving with an inhuman grace that made Cross's hand freeze on his weapon. Marcus Chun died in the depths of Abyssos Prime. But something new was born down there. Something designed specifically to hunt people like you. I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus smiled, and Cross saw that his eyes were glowing with a faint bioluminescence. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The conspiracy, the false flag operations, the systematic destruction of everything the Union represents. He moved closer, and Cross could see that the man was somehow different, taller, more muscular, radiating a presence that spoke of barely contained power. Even if such a conspiracy existed, Cross said carefully, I would have no part in it. Really, Marcus activated a holographic display that filled the air between them. Then, perhaps you can explain these financial transfers from your personal accounts to known criminal organizations? Or these communication logs showing coordination with hostile alien factions? Or maybe this recording of you personally ordering the assassination of Ambassador Zilktar. Cross stared at the evidence, his mind racing. This was impossible. All of that information was encrypted, stored on systems that couldn't be accessed by conventional means. Where did you get this? Let's just say I have a very well-informed partner. Marcus closed the display and stepped closer. Here's what's going to happen, Admiral. You're going to tell me everything about the conspiracy. Every name, every operation, every plan. In return, I'll make sure your death is quick and painless. And if I refuse? Marcus's smile widened, showing teeth that seemed sharper than they should be. Then, I'll turn you over to my partner for questioning. And I promise you, Admiral, the ancient Kraken has ways of extracting information that you cannot imagine. For the first time in years, Admiral Cross felt genuine fear. This thing that looked like Marcus Chun wasn't entirely human anymore. It was something else, something designed for purposes he couldn't fathom. "You're bluffing," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Marcus held up a small device that Cross didn't recognize. "This is a transportation beacon tuned to the Kraken's frequency. One activation, and you'll find yourself in the depths of Abyssos Prime, face to face with a creature that has been waiting millions of years to judge beings like you. The Kraken doesn't make house calls. The Kraken does whatever it chooses to do. The ancient protocols that bound it to that world were written by creatures who never imagined that someone might find a way to rewrite the rules." Marcus's eyes flared brighter. "The question is, do you want to take that chance?" Cross looked at the device in Marcus's hand, then at the evidence still hovering in the holographic display. He thought about the conspiracy, about the years of careful planning that had brought them so close to their ultimate goal. He thought about the people who would kill him if they suspected he'd talked, and the things standing in front of him that would kill him if he didn't. "What guarantee do I have that you'll honor your word?" he asked finally. "None whatsoever," Marcus replied cheerfully. "But consider your alternatives. If you talk, you might live long enough to see some kind of justice done. If you don't talk, I guarantee you'll die screaming in the depths of an alien ocean." Cross was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he moved to his desk and activated his personal terminal. "The conspiracy calls itself the Hegemony Liberation Front," he began, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "The goal is to collapse the Union and establish a new order based on species superiority. The hegemony worlds will become the dominant power, with human space serving as a client state. Who's in charge? No one person. It's a council of representatives from different species, all united by their belief that the Union's egalitarian principles are a weakness that will ultimately destroy galactic civilization." Cross pulled up files on his terminal, displaying organizational charts and operational plans. "The human contingent is led by General Patricia Morrison, formerly of Union Strategic Command. She's been recruiting from within our own military for years." Marcus studied the information, his enhanced mind processing the complex web of relationships and operations at superhuman speed. "What's the timeline for the collapse?" "Soon. Within months." Cross highlighted several entries on the display. "The plan is to trigger a series of cascading failures. Economic sabotage, terrorist attacks, false flag operations designed to make it look like different Union species are betraying each other. When the chaos reaches a critical point, the Liberation Front will offer themselves as the only alternative to complete anarchy. Specific targets: the Union financial networks, the communication relays between core worlds, the diplomatic corps." Cross paused, looking directly at Marcus. "And Earth. They're planning something special for humanity's homeworld." Marcus felt a cold fury building in his chest, enhanced by the Kraken's modifications until it became something almost physical. "What kind of something special?" "I don't know the details. Morrison keeps that operation compartmentalized. But the codename is Prometheus Falls. Whatever it is, it's designed to eliminate Earth as a factor in galactic politics permanently." "Where's Morrison now?" "Her flagship, the Carthage. It's a modified Union dreadnought operating under false registry. She moves it around the outer systems, staying ahead of Union patrols." Cross pulled up another file showing ship movements and supply routes. "But there's a scheduled meeting in 1 week at the Kepler Nebula." All the major players will be there to finalize the operation. Marcus memorized the information instantly, his enhanced mind storing every detail with perfect clarity. When he was finished, he looked back at Admiral Cross. "You've been very cooperative, Admiral. Unfortunately, that doesn't change what you are. I promised your death would be quick and painless. I never promised you wouldn't die." Marcus activated the transportation beacon, and Admiral Cross vanished in a flash of bioluminescent energy. Somewhere in the depths of Abyssos Prime, the ancient Kraken would have a long overdue conversation with one of the conspiracy's architects. As the emergency lighting flickered back to normal, Marcus activated his communicator to contact Elena. "Phase 1 complete," he reported. "We have a location and a timeline. Time to move to Phase 2. "What's Phase 2? Elena's voice asked through the encrypted channel. Marcus looked out the viewport at the stars beyond, thinking about Earth and the billions of innocent beings who had no idea their lives hung in the balance. "Phase 2, he said, is where we remind the galaxy why you should never underestimate humanity." The Hegemony Liberation Front had spent years planning their perfect war. They had no idea they were about to face an enemy that had been specifically designed to turn their own tactics against them, an enemy that combined human determination with alien enhancements and the patient wisdom of one of the galaxy's oldest intelligences. The hunt was about to begin. The Kepler Nebula stretched across space like a wound in reality, its swirling gases and electromagnetic storms providing perfect cover for clandestine meetings. Hidden within its chaotic embrace, the modified dreadnought Carthage hung motionless, its running lights dimmed to avoid detection by Union patrols. On the ship's command deck, General Patricia Morrison stood before a holographic display showing the positions of vessels throughout the nebula. She was a tall woman with iron-gray hair and eyes like chips of winter ice, the kind of person who'd spent a lifetime making hard decisions without flinching. "Status report," she commanded as her senior staff assembled around the tactical table. "All council members have arrived," reported Commander Nash, her chief of staff. "The Hegemony delegation is aboard the Retribution, the Zalani contingent on the Vindication, and the Vorthak representatives are on the Supremacy." "Good. And the Union intelligence situation?" "Clean. Our assets in Union Command report no unusual activity. As far as they know, we're all exactly where we're supposed to be." Nash highlighted several points on the stellar map. "The Prometheus Falls operation is ready to execute on your command." Morrison nodded, studying the positions of her ships. Years of planning had led to this moment, the final gathering before they triggered the collapse of the Galactic Union. In 72 hours, carefully coordinated strikes across dozens of worlds would create enough chaos to justify the Liberation Front stepping in as the galaxy's new order. "What about the Chun situation?" asked Colonel Torres, her intelligence chief. Cross missed his last 3 check-ins. "Chun is dead," Morrison said flatly. "The Kraken judged him guilty and devoured him. Cross is probably just maintaining communication security." "Maybe," Torres said, but his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. "But Chun came closer to exposing us than anyone before, and his investigation methods were unconventional. I recommend we postpone the operation until we can confirm." "We postpone nothing," Morrison cut him off. "We spent 50 years building toward this moment. Every day we delay is another day the Union has to discover our preparations." She gestured at the holographic display. "Besides, look around you. We have 4 dreadnoughts, the most advanced weapons technology in the galaxy, and the element of complete surprise. What could one dead human possibly do to threaten us?" Her question was answered by the proximity alarms that began screaming throughout the ship. "Contact," the sensor operator called out. "Small craft, bearing 027 Mark 15, approaching at high speed." "Impossible," Nash said, staring at his instruments. Nothing could navigate the nebula's electromagnetic storms without being detected. On the main view screen, a sleek vessel emerged from the swirling gases like a predator stalking its prey. It was unlike anything in the Union fleet, organic curves mixed with crystalline technology that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. All ships. This is Morrison. The general barked into her communicator. We have an unidentified contact. Move to intercept and destroy. The 4 dreadnoughts of the Liberation Front began to turn toward the approaching ship, their massive weapon arrays powering up. But before they could fire, the strange vessel did something impossible. It simply vanished. Where did it go? Morrison demanded. I don't know. The sensor operator stammered. It's not showing up on any of our instruments. The lights on the command deck suddenly dimmed, and Morrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. In the shadows at the edge of the bridge, something moved. Hello, General Morrison. Morrison spun toward the voice and felt her heart stop. Standing in what should have been empty space was Marcus Chun, or something that had once been Marcus Chun. The man she was looking at was clearly human, but enhanced in ways that made her skin crawl. His eyes glowed with bioluminescent patterns, and when he moved, it was with a grace that spoke of inhuman strength and speed. Impossible, she breathed. You're dead. Yes, I am. Marcus stepped into the light, and Morrison could see her crew backing away from him in terror. But death, it turns out, is a very flexible concept when you have the right allies. Morrison reached for her sidearm, but Marcus moved faster than her eyes could follow. One moment her weapon was in her hand. The next it was in his, disassembled into its component parts. How did you get aboard my ship? She demanded. The same way I got the information about this meeting from Admiral Cross before I fed him to the ancient Kraken. Marcus smiled, and Morrison saw that his teeth had been modified, sharper, more efficient. Your conspiracy has been very thorough in its planning, General. Unfortunately for you, you never planned for someone like me. Security. Morrison shouted, but there was no response. The communication systems were dead, and the bridge doors had sealed shut. Your security teams are indisposed, Marcus said casually. Don't worry, they're not dead. Just unconscious. I try to avoid unnecessary killing these days. What do you want? Well, I've always wanted the truth. And justice for the innocent people your conspiracy has murdered. Marcus moved to the tactical display and began manipulating the controls with movements too fast to follow. But first, I thought you'd like to see what's happening to your fleet. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the external view of the nebula. The 4 Liberation Front dreadnoughts were still in formation, but something was wrong with the picture. Dark shapes were moving between them, tentacles the size of starships, covered in bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with alien intelligence. Meet my partner, Marcus said as the camera focused on one of the massive appendages. You've heard of the ancient Kraken, I'm sure. It's been judging criminals in the depths of Abyssos Prime for millions of years. But what you probably don't know is that it was never really trapped there. It stayed because it chose to stay, because it was waiting for the right moment to act. On the screen, more tentacles emerged from the nebula's swirling gases. The ancient Kraken was vast beyond comprehension, its body stretching across light years of space, hidden within the electromagnetic chaos of the nebula itself. This is impossible, Morrison whispered. It's just a creature. It can't survive in space. The Kraken isn't just anything, Marcus replied. It's older than your entire species, General. Older than most of the stars in this sector. And it's very, very tired of watching lesser beings destroy what it has worked so long to preserve. The Liberation Front ships began firing on the tentacles surrounding them, their weapons lighting up the nebula with brilliant flashes of energy. But the beams simply passed through the appendages as if they were made of nothing more than colored light. Holographic projections, Nash gasped, staring at his instruments. They're not real. Some of them, Marcus agreed. But some of them are very real indeed. The Kraken's people were master illusionists as well as genetic engineers. They knew how to make their enemies see what they wanted them to see. One of the real tentacles wrapped itself around the hegemony dreadnought Retribution. The massive warship's shields flared and died as alien energies interfaced with its systems, and Morrison watched in horror as the vessel was simply absorbed. Not destroyed, absorbed into the Kraken's vast body as if it had never existed. "The crews are safe," Marcus said, apparently reading her expression. "The Kraken doesn't kill unnecessarily, but it does judge, and your allies are very guilty indeed." The Vindication tried to escape, its engines flaring as it attempted to break free of the tentacles that were wrapping around its hull. But the organic technology of the Kraken was older and more sophisticated than anything the Liberation Front possessed. The ship's systems shut down one by one until it too was absorbed into the creature's impossible anatomy. "You're next," Morrison said, drawing a backup weapon from her boot. "Whatever you are, whatever you've become, you're still mortal." "Am I?" Marcus turned to face her, and Morrison saw something in his eyes that made her blood freeze. "I died, General. I was judged by the oldest intelligence in the galaxy, and found innocent. When I was reborn for a purpose. And that purpose is to stop people like you." Morrison fired, her shots aimed with the precision of a lifetime military career. But Marcus moved like liquid mercury, dodging between the energy beams as if he could predict where each one would go before she pulled the trigger. When he reached her, he simply placed one hand on her weapon, and it crumbled to dust. "The Prometheus Falls operation," he said, his voice carrying undertones that reminded Morrison of the depths of space. "Tell me about it. I'll die before I betray my cause." "Your cause?" Marcus laughed, and the sound made the bridge crew whimper in terror. "General, your cause is about to become extinct. Look around you. Your fleet is gone. Your allies are in the custody of a creature that measures justice in geological timescales, and your entire conspiracy is about to be exposed to the galaxy." On the view screen, the last two Liberation Front ships were being systematically captured by the Kraken's tentacles. Morrison watched the Supremacy's crew being extracted through what looked like organic tubes, their life signs stable, but their ship completely helpless. "Even if you stop us here," Morrison said desperately, "the operation will continue. We have sleeper agents throughout the Union, assets that you know nothing about. Prometheus Falls will happen with or without me." "Actually," said a new voice from the back of the bridge, "I'm afraid that's no longer true." Morrison turned to see Captain Elena Vasquez emerging from what had appeared to be empty air. She was accompanied by a team of Union security operatives, all wearing equipment that Morrison had never seen before. "Captain Vasquez," Morrison said, her mind racing. "I should have known. You were always too idealistic for your own good." "The idealism is what saved me," Elena replied, moving to stand beside Marcus. "While you were planning to destroy everything the Union represents, we were building something better, something that could fight back. Morrison looked between Elena and Marcus, finally beginning to understand. "You've been working together since the beginning." "Since my death, yes." Marcus gestured toward the holographic display, which was now showing tactical information about Liberation Front operations across the galaxy. "The Kraken doesn't just judge individual criminals, General. It sees patterns, connections, the bigger picture. With its help, we've been mapping your entire conspiracy for months. And now," Elena added, "we're ready to roll it up." On the display, markers began appearing across the galactic map. Liberation Front cells being simultaneously raided by Union forces, sleeper agents being arrested, secret weapons caches being secured. The conspiracy that had taken 50 years to build was being dismantled in a matter of hours. "Prometheus Falls?" Elena asked. "Neutralized," one of her operatives reported. "The device was hidden on Luna, disguised as a mining operation. Disposal teams are already on site." Morrison felt the last of her hope die. "What was it?" Marcus asked. "What were you planning to do to Earth?" "A kinetic bombardment system," Morrison said flatly, seeing no point in lying anymore. "Asteroids redirected to look like natural disasters. We were going to make it look like Earth's moon was breaking apart due to mining accidents. The debris would have rendered the entire system uninhabitable." Marcus was silent for a long moment, and Morrison could see something terrible building behind his glowing eyes. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of an ancient ocean. Billions of innocent people. My entire species. You're going to commit genocide. It would have been quick, Morrison said, trying to justify the unjustifiable. And necessary. Humanity is too chaotic, too unpredictable. You don't fit into the ordered galaxy we're trying to create. No, Marcus replied. We don't. And that's exactly why the galaxy needs us. He turned to Elena. The trials? Already being prepared. The evidence we've gathered is overwhelming. Conspiracy, treason, attempted genocide, murder. The tribunal will have everything they need to ensure justice is served. Morrison laughed bitterly. Justice? You're naive if you think this ends with us. There are others, General. Other species who believe the same things we believe. The Union is still doomed to collapse. Maybe, Marcus said, but not today, and not by you. He activated the transportation beacon on his wrist, and Morrison felt the familiar tingle of matter transmission. But instead of the clean, technological feeling of Union transporters, this felt organic, alien, like being absorbed into something vast and living. When the sensation faded, Morrison found herself standing in what looked like a courtroom carved from living coral. Around her, the other leaders of the Liberation Front were being held in bioluminescent restraints that pulsed with their own inner light. Above them all, the ancient Kraken's massive eyes studied them with the patience of geological time. Welcome, the creature's mental voice filled their minds, to the court of final appeal. Back on the Carthage, Marcus and Elena stood on the bridge watching the stars roll past as the ship's autopilot carried them back toward Union space. The conspiracy was broken, the immediate threat neutralized, but Marcus knew this was only the beginning. What happens now? Elena asked. Now we prepare for the next threat, Marcus replied. The Kraken was right. There will be others who try to destabilize the Union. Other species who believe that might makes right, that diversity is weakness instead of strength. And we'll be ready for them. Marcus smiled, and for a moment Elena could see the man she'd once known beneath the genetic modifications. We'll be ready. The galaxy is about to learn something important about humanity, Elena. We don't just refuse to give up. We get better when we're challenged. He activated the ship's communications system and opened a channel to Union Command. This is Captain Elena Vasquez, Elena said into the transmitter. I'm transmitting a full report on the Liberation Front conspiracy and requesting immediate tribunals for the apprehended suspects. The threat to Union security has been neutralized. As the transmission ended, Marcus looked out at the stars and thought about the ancient Kraken, still swimming in the depths of space, still judging those who would threaten the balance of galactic civilization. For millions of years it had waited and watched, preserving knowledge and protecting the innocent from those who would exploit them. Now it had a partner in that mission, a species young and chaotic and utterly unwilling to accept that might makes right. A species that had just proved they could be trusted with the tools to police the galaxy's worst impulses. Humanity had passed its first great test as a galactic civilization. The question was, what would they do with the responsibility that came with that success? Marcus Chun, or whatever he had become, smiled as he contemplated the future. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. In the depths of the Kepler Nebula, the ancient Kraken began its long journey back to Abyssos Prime, carrying with it the last remnants of a conspiracy that had threatened to destroy everything the Union represented. But it also carried something else, hope for a future where justice and truth could prevail against the forces of chaos and oppression. The age of the deep judge had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Far below on Earth, children played in parks under a sun that still shone because a dead man and an ancient creature had decided that some things were worth fighting for. They would grow up in a universe where humanity had proven it belonged among the stars, where the rule of law meant something, and where the innocent could sleep safely knowing that somewhere in the depths of space, patient guardians watched over them all. The ancient Kraken had been looking for a partner for millions of years. In humanity, it had finally found a species worthy of the responsibility. The real adventure was just beginning.